The Mafia boss found his secretary locked in a basement. He was too late to save everything. Roman Cross had survived bullets, betrayals, and wars that turned men into ghosts. But nothing prepared him for the sight of Grace Whitmore sitting against a freezing concrete wall, her wrists bound, her skin pale, and her eyes carrying one question he could not escape. Why did it take you so long to notice I was gone? Outside Chicago drowned beneath cold November rain. Inside that basement, the most feared man in the city finally understood that power meant nothing if he could not protect the one woman who had quietly protected him for years. This is not only a story about crime loyalty and forbidden love. It is about the cost of ignoring the person who holds your world together. Stay until the end, like the video and comment where you are watching from. 3 days before Roman Cross broke through that basement door, Grace Whitmore had been standing beneath the warm lights of his executive floor with a cup of black coffee in one hand and a warning in the other. Chicago was just beginning to wake. Morning light slid between the towers along the river, turning the windows gold while traffic gathered below in long red lines. A cold wind moved off Lake Michigan, sweeping newspapers across sidewalks and forcing early commuters deeper into their coats. 40 stories above the street Cross Atlantic Holdings was already alive. Phones rang behind glass walls. Assistants hurried between conference rooms. Security guards checked badges at every private entrance. On the large digital display near reception, cargo vessels moved across a map of North America like pieces on a silent chessboard. The public believed Cross Atlantic was a shipping empire. It moved construction equipment, medical supplies, luxury automobiles, and industrial machinery through ports from Chicago to Baltimore. The public records showed clean contracts, legal partnerships, and years of impressive growth. The records did not show the favors traded at midnight. They did not show which docks operated without inspection when Roman Cross made a call. They did not show the city officials who became cooperative after quiet dinners, or the men who stopped asking questions after receiving visits from people who never raised their voices. Roman had inherited a wounded organization from his father and turned it into something larger, cleaner, and far more dangerous. His father had ruled through spectacle. Roman ruled through certainty. He did not need to threaten a man twice because he rarely needed to threaten him once. At exactly 7:15, the doors of the private elevator opened. Roman stepped onto the executive floor wearing a charcoal suit beneath a black wool coat. Snow had melted along the shoulders, leaving dark spots on the expensive fabric. His expression was calm, but the employees nearest the elevator lowered their voices as he passed. Grace stood outside his office. She wore a cream blouse beneath a fitted navy jacket. Her dark hair was gathered loosely at the back of her neck, and a thin silver necklace rested against her collarbone. A tablet was tucked beneath one arm. In her other hand was Roman's coffee. She held it out before he could speak. 2 sugars. Roman accepted the cup and looked at her. "I stopped taking sugar 6 months ago. You stopped admitting you take sugar 6 months ago." He took a drink. It was exactly right. Grace turned and began walking toward his office. Roman followed his attention, already shifting to the folder she handed him. "Your 8 o'clock call with Baltimore has been moved to 8:30, she said. "The port director claimed he had a scheduling conflict. He is trying to make me wait." "Yes, move it to tomorrow. I already did." Roman glanced at her. "Then why did you mention it? So you could enjoy being right." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but Grace noticed it. She noticed everything. They passed the main conference room where several executives were gathering around a polished table. Grace lowered her voice as they continued. "The Federal Shipping Review begins at 11. Naomi wants 20 minutes with you beforehand. I moved the union meeting to 1 because Mr. Alvarez needed time to speak with his attorney. He has an attorney now, his wife insisted. Smart woman, she usually is." Roman pushed open the door to his office. The room overlooked the river, the bridges, and the gray sweep of the city beyond. The furniture was severe and expensive. Dark wood, black leather, no photographs on the walls. Grace crossed to his desk and placed 3 folders in a precise row. Roman removed his coat and handed it to her without looking. She took it because she always did. He sat and opened the first folder. "What else, your sister called?" Roman kept reading. "What did she want confirmation that you are attending dinner tonight?" He looked up. "What dinner?" Grace stared at him. Roman exhaled. Her birthday, her 40th birthday. She is not 40. She will be deeply relieved to hear that. Roman set the document aside. Send something to her house. I sent flowers yesterday. What kind? White roses. She hates white roses. That is why I sent peonies. Roman studied Grace for a moment. You remembered. I remember everything you consider too small to matter. The words were quiet. They remained between them longer than they should have. Roman's gaze held hers. Grace wondered whether he heard the accusation beneath the professionalism. If he did, he chose not to touch it. He reached for the second folder. Grace turned toward the door. There is something else. Roman continued reading. There usually is. Someone accessed the restricted logistics archive last night. His hand stopped on the page. At what time? 2:17 in the morning. Security. They listed it as a maintenance scan. Then it was a maintenance scan. Grace did not move. Roman slowly raised his eyes. She was still standing on the other side of his desk. Her fingers rested against the edge of her tablet with too much pressure. You do not believe them, he said. The access lasted 11 minutes. A maintenance scan takes less than 2. Roman leaned back. Who approved it? Lakefront Mechanical Services submitted the request. Gavin Shaw approved the vendor credentials. At the mention of Gavin's name, Roman's expression hardened slightly. Gavin had worked beside him for 12 years. He had been there during the worst months after Roman's father died. He had protected cargo routes negotiated with dock crews and taken a bullet during an ambush outside Milwaukee. Roman trusted very few people. Gavin was one of them. Grace placed a thin file on the desk. The access card belonged to a technician named Adam Voss. There is no photograph in the contractor database. There is no address on the employment record. The Social Security number belongs to a man who died 7 years ago. Roman opened the file. The documentation appeared official at first glance. That was the problem. Every signature was in the correct place. Every approval code matched company procedure. Every time stamp had been inserted cleanly. Whoever created it understood the system. Send it to internal security, Roman said. I did. And they returned it to Gavin's office. Roman closed the file. Then let Gavin handle it. Grace's jaw tightened. He approved the company. Are you accusing him of something? No. Her answer came too quickly. Roman watched her. Grace forced herself to continue. I am telling you the approval chain ends with him. I am telling you that someone used false credentials to enter a restricted archive containing routes that only 5 people in this company are permitted to see. Gavin has protected those routes for 12 years. So have I. Silence settled over the room. It was not the statement itself that surprised him. It was the way she said it. Grace never compared herself to the men surrounding Roman. She never demanded credit. She completed impossible tasks and let someone else accept the praise because she considered recognition less important than results. But now she stood before him with something wounded in her eyes. Roman placed both hands on the desk. What are you asking me to do? I am asking you to look at the file yourself. I am looking at it. No, you are waiting for me to stop speaking so you can return to your meeting. His phone rang. The screen displayed the name of a powerful investor who had spent the previous week threatening to withdraw from a major port agreement. Roman looked at the phone, then at Grace. The ringing filled the room. Grace waited. For one moment, Roman could have chosen differently. He could have asked her to close the door. He could have listened. Instead, he picked up the phone. Cross. Grace remained still for half a second. Then she gathered the file from his desk. Roman covered the phone with one hand. Leave it. You said Gavin would handle it. I will read it later. Grace searched his face. She knew Roman's definition of later. Later meant after the next meeting, after the next crisis, after the next man demanded his attention more loudly than she ever would. She placed the file back on the desk. Of course, Mr. Cross. She turned and walked out. Through the glass wall, Roman watched her cross the executive floor. Her shoulders were straight. Her pace was controlled. Only someone who knew her well would have noticed the way she held her tablet against her chest as though it were the only thing keeping something inside her from breaking loose. Roman knew her well enough to notice. He was not wise enough to follow her. Gavin Shaw arrived 20 minutes later. He entered without waiting for permission, carrying the relaxed confidence of a man who had been welcomed into Roman's private rooms for years. Gavin was tall and broad-shouldered with silver beginning to show at his temples. He wore expensive suits carelessly as though elegance had never required effort from him. He poured himself coffee from the service tray. Grace looked ready to bury someone beneath the parking garage. Roman signed a document. She found a false contractor in the logistics system. Gavin took a drink. She finds conspiracies in missing paperclips. She usually finds them before they become expensive, or she needs to feel necessary. Roman looked up. Gavin smiled as if the comment had been harmless. It was not. Roman understood disrespect in all its forms. He simply did not yet understand why hearing it directed at Grace irritated him. "What do you know about Lakefront Mechanical Services?" Roman asked. Gavin's expression did not change. "A vendor, small repairs, camera systems, electrical work. Grace says the credentials were false. Grace distrusts anyone she did not personally interview. That does not answer me." Gavin set down his cup. "I approved them after security confirmed the insurance and work history. I can review the file again. Do that." Gavin nodded. His eyes shifted toward Grace's office beyond the glass wall. She was speaking with Naomi Price, the company's general counsel. The two women stood close together, their voices too low to hear. "What exactly did she find?" Gavin asked. Roman returned to his paperwork. "Nothing that concerns you. A lesser man might have shown fear." Gavin smiled. "Then I will leave you to your empire." When he left, Roman looked toward Grace again. She had disappeared from view. The rest of the morning dissolved into negotiations. Roman moved from one meeting to another while Grace controlled the flow of people around him. She prevented impatient executives from entering at the wrong moment. She placed documents beneath his hand seconds before he needed them. She redirected calls without interrupting his concentration. At noon, a tray of food appeared on the table beside him. Roman glanced at it. Grace stood in the doorway. "I did not order lunch." "That has never stopped you from requiring it. I have another meeting. You also have a human body. That remains unconfirmed." She almost smiled. Almost. Roman noticed the fatigue beneath her eyes. "You were here late last night. So were you." That was not an answer. It was the only one available. Her phone vibrated. Grace looked at the screen and something in her expression changed. Not fear exactly, recognition. She silenced the phone. "Who was that?" Roman asked. "No one. You do not ignore calls from no one." She placed the lunch receipt on the table. "Eat before it gets cold. Grace." She paused at the door. Roman wanted to ask what was wrong. He wanted to ask why she had looked over her shoulder twice since entering his office. He wanted to ask whether she had slept, whether she felt safe, whether the name on her phone belonged to someone he should know. The questions felt too personal. Roman had spent his life treating personal questions like open doors. Once opened, they allowed people into rooms he had survived by keeping locked. He chose the safer question. "Did you confirm tonight's dinner?" Grace's face became unreadable. "Yes." She left. Roman stared at the empty doorway for several seconds before returning to the contract in front of him. 2 floors below, Grace entered a records room used by the accounting department. The room smelled of paper dust and overheated electronics. Rows of gray cabinets stood beneath fluorescent lights. She closed the door and locked it. Then she placed the lakefront file on a table. Grace had spent 6 years beside Roman Cross. She knew how his organization concealed its secrets because she was often the person asked to protect them. Legitimate payments moved through ordinary accounts. Sensitive payments moved through consulting firms. Criminal payments were disguised as losses, damaged cargo emergency repairs, or canceled shipments. Lakefront Mechanical Services had received 27 payments in 11 months. Each amount was small enough to avoid an automatic audit. Together, they totaled more than $2 million. Grace entered the company's tax number into a private database. The record appeared on the screen. Lakefront Mechanical Services had closed nearly a year earlier. She opened the payment history. The money had not gone to employees' equipment or repair materials. It had been transferred through 3 shell companies registered in Delaware. One of those companies owned an abandoned cold storage facility in the back of the yard's neighborhood. Grace's pulse quickened. She pulled the restricted shipping schedule from the archive. Several routes had been altered after Lakefront received payments. On the nights those routes changed, Cross Cargo had been attacked, twice near Detroit, once outside Gary, once at a private warehouse near Baltimore. The attacks had been blamed on the Halstead organization, Roman's most aggressive rival, but the Halsteads could not have known the routes unless someone inside Cross Atlantic had sold them. Grace printed the records. The machine sounded unbearably loud in the empty room. She removed a small memory card from her necklace and copied the digital files. The progress bar moved slowly. 30%, 46, 62. Footsteps approached outside. Grace stopped breathing. The footsteps passed. She closed her eyes. The transfer reached 100%. When she removed the memory card, the door handle turned. Someone tried once. Then again. Grace gathered the papers and held them against her chest. The lock clicked. The door opened. Gavin stood in the hallway. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. His gaze moved from Grace to the documents in her arms. "You work too late," he said. Grace stepped away from the computer. "So do dishonest men." Gavin smiled. "Is that an accusation?" "It is an observation. You should be careful with those. You should be careful with dead companies that continue receiving money." The smile remained on his face, but all warmth vanished from his eyes. "You think Roman will choose your suspicions over 12 years of loyalty?" Grace looked directly at him. "I think Roman will choose the truth once he finally sees it." Gavin stepped into the room. Grace did not retreat. He closed the door behind him. "You admire him. That is none of your concern. You mistake his dependence on you for affection." Grace's fingers tightened around the documents. "I do not mistake anything about Roman." No. Gavin moved closer. "You keep his life in order. You remember his family. You clean up his mistakes. You stand outside his office like a faithful wife without the inconvenience of being loved." The words struck where he intended them to. Grace refused to show it. She lifted her chin. "At least I know what I am to him." Gavin's gaze narrowed. "Do you?" The room felt smaller. Grace reached toward the panic button beneath the table. Gavin noticed. He stepped back. "Relax. If I intended to hurt you, this conversation would be much shorter." Grace kept her hand near the table. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop searching through matters you do not understand." "I understand that someone is selling Roman's roots. You understand numbers on a page, and those numbers frighten you." For the first time, Gavin's control slipped, only slightly. But Grace saw it. She had built her life on noticing slight changes. "You should go home," he said. "I will, and take a few days off." "No, Grace." She moved past him and opened the door. "I do not take instructions from you." Gavin watched her leave. His voice followed her into the hallway. "You take them from Roman." Grace stopped. She did not turn around. Gavin continued. "And he already told you to let me handle it." Grace walked away. By early evening, most of the executive floor had emptied. The Chicago sky darkened beyond the windows, turning the river into a black ribbon between towers. Rain began tapping against the glass. Roman remained at his desk. Grace stood outside his office, holding the evidence in a sealed folder. She had rehearsed the conversation 3 times. She would tell him Lakefront was a dead company. She would show him the shell accounts. She would explain the connection between the payments and the attacked routes. She would tell him Gavin had confronted her. Then she would make Roman listen. Grace knocked. "Come in." Roman sat behind his desk with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled to his forearms. A half-finished drink rested beside a stack of contracts. He looked tired, not weak. Roman Cross never looked weak, but Grace knew the small signs. The tension near his eyes. The way he pressed 2 fingers against his temple when a headache had begun. The untouched food on the table. She entered and placed his schedule in front of him. "You have been working for 14 hours. So have you. I am paid to make better decisions. And I am not. You are paid to make expensive decisions." Roman leaned back. "That sounds like criticism. It is a medical observation. Are you a doctor now?" "No doctors are listened to." The answer landed harder than she intended. Roman studied her. Grace held the sealed folder against her side. "Sit down," he said. "I would rather stand." That was not a request. "Then I definitely prefer standing." A faint smile touched his face. The smile almost destroyed her resolve. Roman gestured toward the chair anyway. Grace did not move. His expression became serious. What happened today? She looked at him. For 6 years she had watched Roman enter rooms filled with dangerous men and make them doubt their own courage. She had watched him face federal investigators without blinking. She had seen him return from meetings with blood on his cuff and calm in his voice. But the man before her now was simply tired, and she loved him. The truth had grown quietly without permission. It lived in every cup of coffee she remembered, every dinner she forced him to attend, every threat she removed before it reached his door. Grace had never wanted his money. She had never wanted his name. She had only wanted him to look at her once and see someone standing beside him, not someone assigned to wait outside. She placed the folder on his desk. I found proof that the maintenance company is false. Roman's eyes moved to the folder. How much proof enough to connect the payments to 4 compromised routes? He sat forward. Who else knows Gavin? Roman's gaze sharpened. You showed him. He found me in the records room. What did he do? Warned me to stop. Roman stood. The change in him was immediate. Fatigue disappeared. His voice lowered. Did he touch you? Grace stared at him. No. Did he threaten you? Not directly. Roman came around the desk. How directly do you need a threat to be? She could feel the heat of him now, the controlled anger beneath his skin. For one dangerous second, Grace believed he had finally understood. Then his phone rang. Roman ignored it. The phone stopped. A second line began ringing. Grace looked at the folder. Read it tonight. I will, not later. His eyes met hers. Grace, promise me. Roman glanced toward the flashing phone. A message appeared on the screen. Baltimore agreement collapsing. Immediate response required. Grace saw his attention shift. Only slightly. It was enough. Roman picked up the phone. Give me 10 minutes. She looked at him. You always need 10 minutes. He covered the receiver. This affects 3 ports and hundreds of employees. So does the folder. I said I will read it. When tonight? Grace waited. Roman turned away and began speaking into the phone. The call pulled him across the room toward the windows, toward the empire that always demanded him more loudly than she did. Grace looked at the back of the man she had protected for years. Then she took the folder from his desk. Roman glanced over his shoulder. Leave it, I need to add something. What? The part where no one listened. Before he could respond, she walked out. An hour later, Roman finished the call. He looked toward Grace's desk. She was still there, typing beneath the dimmed lights of the executive floor. Roman stepped into the doorway of his office. Grace. She looked up. For a moment, neither moved. Roman wanted to tell her to bring the folder back. He wanted to apologize for the call. He wanted to ask why the idea of Gavin frightening her had awakened something violent inside him. Instead, he said, You should go home. Grace closed her laptop. So should you. That sounds like an order. It is a recommendation, noted. She placed a printed schedule on her desk. Roman watched her slide the sealed folder into her leather work bag. Grace. She turned. He had no idea what he meant to say. Be careful felt too intimate. Stay felt impossible. I need you sounded like weakness. Roman had spent years removing weakness from his voice. Good night, he said. Something faded behind her eyes. Good night, Mr. Cross. Grace entered the elevator alone. The doors closed between them. Roman remained beside her empty desk for several seconds. A small plant sat near her monitor. Beside it was a framed photograph of Grace with her parents on a beach in Maine. She was laughing in the picture. Roman could not remember the last time he had heard her laugh that freely. The elevator carried Grace down to the private parking level. The underground garage was nearly empty. Fluorescent lights reflected across wet concrete. Rainwater dripped from the tires of parked cars. Her heels echoed as she walked toward her sedan. Grace reached into her bag for her keys. A white maintenance van stood several spaces away. Gavin leaned against the passenger door. Grace stopped. Every instinct told her to turn around. Roman has been hurt, Gavin said. Her hand tightened around the keys. What happened? There was a problem at one of the private warehouses. Which warehouse? He refused an ambulance. Grace stepped closer, despite the warning rising inside her. Where is he, South Side? Why did no one call me? He asked for you. The answer reached the one part of her that fear could not control. Grace looked at the empty driver's seat. Who is driving? A shadow moved behind her. Grace turned. A man in dark clothing caught her wrist before she could reach the alarm on her keys. She struck him with her bag. The sealed folder fell open across the wet floor. Pages slid beneath the van. Grace drove her elbow backward and heard the man curse. Gavin seized her other arm. "Do not make this worse," she looked at him. "Roman will kill you." Gavin pulled the memory card from the silver necklace at her throat. "Roman has to notice you are gone first." Grace fought harder. A cloth pressed over her mouth. The garage lights blurred. Her fingers searched the floor and found the blue fountain pen she always carried. She tore off the cap and let it fall beneath the van. Then darkness closed over her. At 7:15 the next morning, the private elevator opened onto the executive floor. Roman Cross stepped out expecting black coffee, a quiet voice, and the woman who had never once failed to be waiting. Grace's chair was empty. Roman stopped beside it, one hand still wrapped around the coffee he had bought downstairs. He had never bought his own coffee before, not in this building. For 6 years it had appeared on the corner of his desk at exactly the right temperature. Grace never asked whether he wanted it. She noticed when he arrived early, when he had slept badly, and when a meeting required 2 sugars instead of 1. That morning there was no cup waiting for him, no quiet voice reading his schedule, no blue ink beside the documents on his desk, only the pale morning light falling across an abandoned chair. Roman looked toward Grace's assistant. "Where is she?" The young woman glanced up from her computer. "She has not arrived yet, Mr. Cross." Roman checked the time. 7:17. Grace had been late only once in 6 years. A subway fire had trapped half the city underground, and she had still called him before the news stations reported it. "Did she contact you? No, sir. Did she call Human Resources? I checked. They have not heard from her." Roman's eyes moved across Grace's desk. Her cardigan hung over the chair. The small plant near her monitor had been turned toward the window so it could catch the morning sun. A legal pad rested beneath her fountain pen. Everything looked prepared for a day she had intended to attend. Roman placed the coffee on her desk. "Call her." The assistant picked up the phone. Roman stood there while it rang. Once, twice. Then the call went to voicemail. Grace's recorded voice filled the receiver. Calm, professional, familiar. Roman felt an unexpected pressure beneath his ribs. The assistant lowered the phone. "Maybe she is sick. Grace does not get sick without scheduling it." The young woman smiled uncertainly, unsure whether he was joking. Roman was not. He walked into his office. The folder Grace had shown him the night before was not on his desk. He remembered her taking it when she left. He remembered watching her step into the elevator. He remembered the look in her eyes after he answered the phone. Roman sat down and opened his calendar. Every appointment had been arranged. Each document was attached. Grace had prepared the entire day before leaving. At 8:30, Naomi Price entered with 2 contracts and no patients. "Where is Grace Roman signed the first page? She is not here. I can see that." Naomi placed the contracts in front of him. "She was supposed to send me the lakefront records last night." Roman's pen stopped. "What did she tell you that she found irregular payments connected to compromised routes?" Roman looked up. "How much did she show you? Enough to make me nervous? Not enough to understand the structure?" "Did she mention Gavin Naomi studied him? She asked whether vendor approvals could be altered after submission. And what did you tell her that they could, but only by someone with executive clearance?" Roman leaned back. "Gavin has executive clearance, so do you." The statement was not an accusation. That made it worse. Naomi continued. "Grace said she would bring me the complete file this morning." Roman looked toward the glass wall. Her chair remained empty. He reached for the phone and called her himself. Voicemail. He called again. The same calm recording answered him. Roman ended the call before the tone. "She may have gone directly to your office," Naomi said. "She would have called. People do unexpected things. Grace does not." Naomi watched him carefully. Roman could feel the question forming in her mind. He did not allow her to ask it. Find out whether she used her badge this morning. Naomi nodded and left. The day continued because Roman's world did not know how to stop. Executives entered his office with numbers, contracts, disputes, and decisions. Men argued over port fees while Roman watched the empty desk beyond the glass. At 10, he asked Grace's assistant whether she had called again. At 10:20, he asked security whether Grace's car was in the garage. At 11, he sent a driver to her apartment. At 11:30, the driver reported that no one answered. Roman canceled his afternoon meetings. The decision caused 3 executives to stare at him as though the building had shifted beneath their feet. Roman Cross did not cancel meetings. He made other people cancel their lives. At noon, Gavin entered without knocking. He carried a folder beneath one arm. "I heard Grace is missing." Roman stood near the window. "She is absent." Gavin closed the door. "There is a difference. There will be when I decide there is." Gavin placed the folder on the desk. "I reviewed Lakefront Mechanical Services. The credentials were old, but security approved them through a temporary vendor account. Grace said the company had closed. It had. The name was purchased by another contractor. Which contractor? Gavin hesitated for less than a second. Roman noticed. "We are still verifying that." Roman turned from the window. Grace found $2 million in payments. She found numbers without context. She found routes that were attacked after those payments cleared. Gavin's expression remained calm. "Then she should have brought the information to me." "She did." "No. She confronted me in a records room as though I were a criminal." Roman stepped closer. "Are you offended I am concerned? She has been under pressure for months." "What kind of pressure? The kind created by managing your life?" Roman's eyes hardened. Gavin continued before he could respond. "She stays late. She skips meals. She involves herself in matters beyond her position. Perhaps she finally reached a point where she needed distance. She left her cardigan." What Roman looked through the glass at Grace's desk. "She left her cardigan." Gavin followed his gaze. Roman spoke quietly. "She takes it home every night because the cleaning crew lowers the temperature after 7. Gavin gave a small shrug. "People forget things. Grace does not forget. Everyone forgets eventually." Roman looked at him. The room became very still. Gavin held his gaze, but the confidence in his face had tightened. Roman walked around the desk. "Where were you last night?" Gavin smiled with disbelief. "Are you questioning me?" "I asked a simple question. I was at the Fulton Club until 11. 20 people saw me. Before that, at the office." "Which floor?" Gavin's smile disappeared. "The logistics floor." Roman moved closer. "Did you see Grace leave?" "No." "Did you enter the parking garage?" "No." "Did you speak to her after the records room?" Gavin's jaw shifted. "You are letting concern turn into a suspicion." Roman stopped inches from him. "That is what concern becomes when people answer slowly." For the first time, Gavin looked away, only briefly. Then he picked up his folder. "You should investigate the Halsteads. They have attacked 4 cross shipments this year. If Grace discovered something connected to the routes, they may have learned she knew." Roman did not answer. Gavin reached the door. "Roman." Gavin turned back. Roman's voice was low. "If you remember anything else about last night, tell me before I discover it myself." Gavin left without replying. Roman watched him cross the executive floor. Gavin did not look at Grace's desk, not once. At 1:13, Naomi returned with the badge records. Grace entered the building at 6:58 the previous morning. She accessed the executive floor accounting records, the legal archive, and the private garage. Her last recorded entry was the parking level at 6:19 in the evening. There was no record of her badge being used after that. "Show me the garage footage," Roman said. The head of corporate security arrived with a tablet and 2 technicians. They gathered in Roman's conference room. The video began at 6:10. Grace appeared inside the elevator wearing her navy coat and carrying her leather work bag. She looked tired. When the doors opened, she stepped into the garage and disappeared beyond the camera's angle. A second recording showed her walking past a row of parked cars. At 6:21, she stopped. Roman leaned toward the screen. Why did she stop? The security director enlarged the image. The footage was grainy, but Grace was clearly looking toward something outside the camera's view. A white corner appeared at the edge of the frame, the side of a vehicle. Then the video froze. The image of Grace remained on the screen, 1 foot forward, her face turned toward the unseen vehicle. The timestamp continued moving. 6:22, 6:23, 6:24. The picture did not change. At 6:35, the footage jumped. The parking space was empty. Grace was gone. Roman stared at the screen. "Play it again." The director replayed the footage, the same frozen image. The same 14-minute gap. Roman looked at the technicians. What caused it? One of them cleared his throat. A server interruption. Only one camera. Yes. Only during those 14 minutes. Yes. Roman turned toward the security director. Grace supervised the installation of this system. The man swallowed. Yes, sir. She rejected the first proposal because it created blind spots near the private garage. Yes. So explain how the only camera covering that section failed at the exact moment she disappeared. No one answered. Roman's phone rang. He ignored it. Recover the original file. We may need several hours. You have one. The technicians left quickly. Roman remained before the frozen image. Grace looked as though she were walking into a conversation. Not running, not resisting. She had recognized whoever was waiting. Naomi stood beside him. You think she knew the person? She would not approach a stranger in an empty garage. What about the white vehicle? Roman looked toward the security director. Find every maintenance van that entered this building yesterday. The director checked the access logs. There was one. Company Lakefront Mechanical Services. Naomi's face changed. Roman felt something cold settle inside him. Who approved entry? The director hesitated. Roman did not raise his voice. Who? Mr. Shaw's office. Roman looked again at Grace's frozen image. For the first time, her absence no longer felt like a disruption. It felt like an attack. By 3 that afternoon, Daniel Hart had arrived. Daniel had spent 20 years as a Chicago detective before leaving the department under circumstances no one discussed. He now worked for Roman when a problem required someone who understood both law and the people who avoided it. He entered Grace's office wearing a dark raincoat and thin gloves. Roman stood near the door. Do not disturb anything. Daniel looked around. You already did. Roman followed his gaze. The coffee Roman had placed on Grace's desk that morning remained untouched. I moved nothing else. Daniel examined the desk. The legal pad contained Tuesday's priorities in Grace's handwriting. Call Baltimore, confirm union documents, review lakefront transfers with Naomi, speak to Roman privately. The final item had been underlined twice. Daniel opened the top drawer. Inside were paper clips, spare chargers, pain medication, and a small set of keys. Roman recognized them. Her apartment. Daniel looked at him. You are certain I sent a locksmith there 2 years ago when she left them inside. Daniel lifted the keys without touching them directly. She did not drive home. Her car is still in the garage. Then she did not intend to leave with anyone. Roman's jaw tightened. Daniel searched the remaining drawers. Everything was organized with almost obsessive care. Receipts clipped by date, pens arranged by color, emergency contacts printed and labeled. Then Daniel crouched beside the desk. What there is tape beneath the bottom drawer. He removed a small envelope. Roman recognized Grace's handwriting before Daniel opened it. The front contained only 2 words, for Roman. Daniel handed it to him. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Roman unfolded it. The message had been written in Grace's blue ink. If I disappear, do not look across the river. Look at the man who carries your keys. Roman read it again. Naomi stepped closer. Across the river means Halstead territory. Roman nodded. She knew someone would try to blame them. Daniel pointed toward the second sentence. Who carries your keys? Roman thought of his homes, offices, warehouses, vehicles, and private routes. Only a few men had access to all of them. Marcus Reed, Gavin Shaw, the head of security, Roman himself. His gaze returned to the note. Grace had expected danger. She had known enough to leave a message, and still she had walked into the garage alone. Roman closed his fist around the paper, the edges cut into his palm. Daniel noticed. Do not destroy it. Roman loosened his grip. Find Marcus. Marcus Reed arrived before sunset. He entered the conference room carrying no phone and asking no questions. Naomi locked the doors behind him. Daniel placed the access logs, vendor records, and photographs across the table. Roman stood at the head of the room. Outside, rain pressed against the windows, turning Chicago into a city of blurred lights. Marcus read Grace's note. His face remained still until he reached the second sentence. The man who carries your keys, he said. She meant an insider, Roman replied. She meant someone you trust. Roman looked at the empty chair beside him. Grace usually sat there during private meetings, ready to record decisions no one else was permitted to hear. Marcus placed the note on the table. When did you last speak to her last night? What did she tell you that she found proof? And what did you do? Roman's silence answered. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. She expected you to notice. Roman's voice was quiet. I noticed. After her chair was empty. The words struck cleanly. Roman did not defend himself. He looked at Daniel. Build the final 72 hours of her life. Every call, every badge, every vehicle, every person who entered this floor. Naomi opened the vendor records. Lakefront Mechanical received more than $2 million. The accounts lead to 3 shell companies. Trace the owners. I already started. Marcus studied the parking image. The van is meant to point us somewhere, Halstead Roman said. Then it is probably pointing away from the truth. Roman's phone vibrated on the table. An unknown number. Everyone looked at it. Roman answered. No one spoke on the other end. He heard breathing, then a faint sound. Metal scraping against concrete. Roman stood completely still. Grace. The breathing stopped. A man's voice spoke quietly. You should have listened when she asked. The line went dead. Roman stared at the phone. Daniel was already moving. Can you trace it? Naomi asked. Not from here. Roman replayed the sentence in his mind. Not when she warned you. Not when she told you. When she asked. The caller knew the conversation inside Roman's office. The caller knew Grace had begged him to read the file. Someone had been watching them. Roman turned toward the glass walls of the conference room. For years, Grace had insisted that honest people should never fear being seen. Now Roman understood the danger of believing everyone watching was honest. Daniel's computer sounded. A location appeared on the screen. The call bounced through 3 towers, he said, but one signal repeated near an industrial district south of the river. Naomi opened a map. The signal covered several square miles. Warehouses, freight yards, abandoned factories. Marcus pointed to a property near the old stockyards. Who owns that building? Naomi searched the address. The company name appeared. Lakeshore Cold Storage Holdings. She opened the registration record. The owner was another corporation, then another. At the end of the chain was one of the same shell companies connected to Lakefront Mechanical Services. Roman reached for his coat. Daniel stood. We still need confirmation. Roman looked at the frozen image of Grace on the screen. She has been gone for 21 hours. Going in without knowing who is there could get her killed. Waiting could do the same. Marcus moved between Roman and the door. Then we do this correctly. Roman's eyes met his. Marcus continued. We verify the property. We check traffic cameras. We find the van. Then we move. Roman wanted to push past him. Every instinct told him to tear the city apart until someone gave Grace back. But rage was not a plan. Grace had spent years protecting him from decisions made in anger. Roman forced himself to stop. 30 minutes. Daniel gathered the files. Naomi began calling contacts. Marcus opened the map. Roman remained beside Grace's empty chair. He placed her apartment keys on the table next to the note she had written for him. Outside, the rain darkened the Chicago River until the water looked almost black. On Daniel's screen, cameras began opening one by one across the south side. At 7:43, a white maintenance van appeared beneath a streetlight less than 2 blocks from Lakeshore Cold Storage. Roman reached for his coat again. This time, no one tried to stop him. Roman crossed the executive floor without speaking. Marcus followed at his right shoulder, Daniel at his left. Behind them, Naomi remained in the conference room with the files spread across the table, tracing every company account and authorization connected to the cold storage property. The private elevator opened. Roman stepped inside and pressed the garage level. Rain covered Chicago in a gray curtain. By the time the black vehicles left the underground entrance of Cross Atlantic Holdings, the river had disappeared beneath fog and reflected headlights. Tires cut through standing water. Traffic lights changed over empty intersections. Sirens sounded somewhere west, distant and meaningless. Roman sat in the back of the first vehicle with Grace's note in his hand. If I disappear, do not look across the river. Look at the man who carries your keys. The paper was creased now. He had read it so many times that every stroke of blue ink seemed carved into his memory. Marcus sat across from him, checking the chamber of his pistol. Daniel's people are 2 minutes ahead, he said. Roman looked through the rain-streaked window. How many entrances? 3 visible. Loading dock, side door, roof access. Underground property records show a lower storage level. Roman tightened his hand around the note. Marcus watched him. You need to think before we enter. I have been thinking for 21 hours. No, you have been blaming yourself for 21 hours. That is not the same thing. Roman turned toward him. Marcus did not look away. If she is inside, anger will make you careless. If she is inside, I'm not leaving without her. I know. The vehicle turned south. The towers of downtown gave way to warehouses, rail lines, and dark industrial streets. The cold storage building appeared at the end of a narrow road bordered by rusted fencing. It was larger than the photograph suggested. 6 stories of black brick rose against the rain. Most of the windows had been boarded. A faded sign above the loading dock still carried the shadow of a company name removed years ago, Lakeshore Cold Storage. The white maintenance van sat beneath a broken exterior light. Its rear doors were open. No one was inside. Roman's vehicle stopped before the gate. Daniel was already there, crouched beside the chain. He looked up as Roman approached. The lock was cut from the inside. Movement, one heat source near the front office. Could be a person. Could be old machinery. Roman drew his pistol. Marcus caught his arm. Grace is the priority. Roman stared at the dark building. She is the only priority. Daniel motioned toward the loading dock. 2 of his men moved ahead, keeping close to the wall. One tested the steel door. Unlocked. That was wrong. Roman felt it immediately. People who hid women in basements did not forget to lock doors. Daniel leaned closer. They know we are here. Then they know why. The door opened with a long metallic groan. Cold air moved out of the building, carrying the smell of rust oil and rotting insulation. They entered. The loading area stretched into darkness. Empty racks rose toward the ceiling. Plastic curtains hung from old refrigeration units, shifting softly whenever the wind entered through broken windows. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Roman's footsteps echoed across the concrete. The sound reminded him of the phone call, metal scraping against the floor. Grace breathing. You should have listened when she asked. His grip tightened around the pistol. Daniel raised one hand. Everyone stopped. A light glowed behind a glass partition near the front office. Roman moved toward it. Inside, a bank of computer monitors displayed security footage from different parts of the building. One screen showed the loading dock. Another showed the road outside. A third showed a concrete basement. Grace was on that screen. Roman stopped breathing. She sat against a wall with her hands restrained in front of her. Her head rested against the concrete. One knee was bent. The other leg lay extended across the floor. Her eyes were closed. A portable heater stood several feet away, unplugged. Beside her image, red numbers counted backward. 11 minutes and 43 seconds. Roman stepped closer. What is that? Daniel studied the equipment, automated system. For what Marcus looked toward an old fire control panel mounted on the wall. Red lights blinked beside labels for the lower storage chambers. Daniel crossed to it and opened the metal cover. The smell reached them before he spoke. Gasoline. They altered the suppression lines, he said. The basement vents are connected to fuel tanks. Roman stared at the countdown. What happens at 0? Daniel looked at him. The lower level burns. A phone rang on the desk. The sound was sharp in the silent office. Roman answered. Where is she? Gavin's voice came through the speaker. You found the building faster than I expected. Roman looked at Grace on the monitor. If she dies, there is no place on earth that will keep you alive. There he is. Gavin sounded almost amused. The Roman cross, I remember. Tell me how to stop the system. You have 2 problems. Grace is one of them. Roman's eyes moved to the other monitors. A camera showed a vehicle parked behind the building. Its engine was running. You are still here, not for long. Marcus saw the screen and signaled 2 men toward the rear exit. Gavin laughed softly. You can send them after me. You may even catch the car. Roman said nothing. But the control device for the basement is moving with me. Daniel searched beneath the desk, following the wires. There's a local override, he whispered. It may take time. Roman kept the phone against his ear. What do you want the drive Grace copied? She has it. No. She hid it before she entered the van. Roman looked at the broken necklace visible on the basement screen. Gavin continued. She always believed she was smarter than the men around her. She was right. Then ask yourself why she still ended up in that room. Roman's jaw tightened. Why, Grace? Because she noticed what stronger men were paid not to see. The vehicle on the rear camera began moving. Marcus's men reached the door. Roman lifted one hand. They stopped. Gavin heard the silence. "You can chase me," he said, "or you can search for her. You will not have time for both." Roman stared at Grace. Her head moved slightly, a weak motion. She was alive. Gavin continued. "You built an empire by never allowing a man to take something from you. If you let me leave, every family from Chicago to Baltimore will know Roman Cross chose a secretary over his own authority." Roman's face became still. For most of his life, decisions had been measured in territory, reputation, and consequence. His father had taught him that anything taken had to be reclaimed publicly. Mercy invited challenge. Hesitation created weakness. Love gave enemies a map to your throat. Grace had spent 6 years erasing the consequences of that education. She had rerouted meetings when Roman was too angry to negotiate. She had removed frightened employees from rooms before his silence destroyed them. She had kept his sister's birthday on his calendar, medicine in his desk, and food beside him when he forgot he possessed a body. She had protected the man hidden beneath the name. Roman lowered his gun. "Let him go." Marcus looked at him. Roman did not turn. "Bring Grace home." The men at the rear door stepped back. The vehicle disappeared from the screen. For a moment, Gavin said nothing. When he spoke again, the amusement was gone. "She changed you." Roman watched the countdown fall below 10 minutes. "No," he said. "She showed me what was already missing." He ended the call. Daniel pulled wires from the control panel. "I need access to the basement valves. Where below us, East Corridor." Roman was already moving. They crossed the warehouse at a run. The corridor narrowed between old refrigeration chambers. Emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, turning everyone into shadows. At the far end, a staircase descended behind a steel gate. The gate was chained. Roman fired once at the lock. The gunshot exploded through the building. The chain fell. Marcus opened the gate and Roman went down first. The air changed with every step. Colder, heavier. The smell of fuel grew stronger. At the bottom of the staircase, 2 corridors split in opposite directions. Daniel pointed right. Control room. Roman pointed left. Basement. Marcus looked between them. "I will go with Roman." Daniel and the others ran toward the control room. Roman moved down the left corridor. The countdown continued through a speaker mounted above them. 8 minutes and 16 seconds. A recorded voice announced the number without emotion. The corridor ended at a rusted steel door. A heavy chain crossed the handle. Roman struck it with the butt of his gun. The lock held. Marcus raised his weapon. "Move!" He fired into the lock. Metal sparked, but the chain remained. Smoke began creeping from a vent near the ceiling. Roman stepped back and drove his shoulder against the door. Pain shot across his chest. The frame groaned. "Roman!" He struck it again. The chain shifted. From behind the door came a faint scraping sound. "Grace." Roman drove his shoulder into the steel a third time. The lock tore free. The door opened. Roman crossed the room faster than Marcus could follow. Grace sat against the far wall exactly as she had appeared on the monitor. Up close, the damage was worse. Her blouse was torn at one sleeve. Dark marks circled her wrists. Her right hand was swollen where the plastic restraint had cut into the skin. Her lips were pale. A thin line of blood marked one side of her face. Roman dropped to his knees. "Grace." She did not respond. He touched her cheek. Her skin was cold enough to frighten him. "Grace, open your eyes." Her eyelids moved. Roman leaned closer. "It is me." Her gaze struggled to focus. For one terrible second, fear crossed her face. Then recognition replaced it. "You came," she whispered. Roman reached for the restraint around her wrists. "I am here." Her lips moved again. He lowered his head until he could hear her. "Not soon enough." Her eyes closed. Roman froze. The words entered him quietly. That made them worse. Marcus knelt beside him and cut the restraint. The moment the pressure released, Grace's injured hand fell against Roman's chest. He caught it carefully. The countdown reached 6 minutes. Smoke thickened beneath the ceiling. Roman lifted Grace into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. He remembered watching her carry stacks of files, manage crowded rooms, and move through his days as if exhaustion were something that happened to other people. Now her head rested against his shoulder. "Stay with me," he said. She did not answer. They reached the corridor as Daniel's voice came through Marcus's radio. "The primary valve is jammed. We are shutting down the fuel manually." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Get out now." Roman carried Grace toward the stairs. The recorded voice announced 4 minutes. Behind them, metal groaned inside the walls. A sharp hiss filled the corridor. Fuel vapor moved through the vents. Marcus pulled off his coat and covered Grace's face. At the staircase, the emergency lights went dark. Roman did not slow. He climbed by touch, one arm beneath Grace's knees, the other pressed across her back. Halfway up, an explosion shook the lower floor. Heat struck the stairwell. Marcus pushed Roman upward. "Move!" Roman reached the loading level as smoke rolled through the warehouse. Men rushed toward them with emergency blankets. Roman refused to release Grace. Daniel emerged from the corridor behind them, coughing. The lower line ignited. "We closed the main tank." Roman looked at him. "Is the building safe?" "No." The ceiling above the loading dock cracked. Everyone ran. Rain struck Roman's face as he carried Grace into the open air. A section of the roof collapsed behind them. Flames climbed through broken windows. The abandoned building glowed against the black Chicago sky. A medical vehicle waited beyond the gate. Nathan Ellis stepped out before it stopped moving. Roman placed Grace on the stretcher. Nathan cut away the damaged sleeve and examined her hand. "Pulse is weak." She was conscious. When inside, she spoke. Nathan placed an oxygen mask over her face. "What did she say?" Roman looked down at Grace. "Nothing that helps you." Nathan did not ask again. The team lifted the stretcher into the vehicle. Roman climbed in after them. Marcus caught the door. "We need to follow the van." Roman looked at him. Marcus could see the answer before Roman spoke. "Find Gavin," Roman said. "Bring him alive." The doors closed. The ambulance moved into the rain. Nathan worked with controlled speed, attaching monitors, warming Grace with heated blankets, checking her circulation. Roman sat across from her. Every few seconds he watched the monitor to make sure the line continued moving. He knew Grace's blood type. He knew she was allergic to penicillin. He knew her mother's name and the number of the physician listed in her personnel file. He knew because employment documents had required him to know. But he did not know where Grace went when she needed to feel safe. He did not know whether she had ever wanted children. He did not know why she hated windowless conference rooms, or why she touched the silver necklace at her throat whenever she was afraid. He had possessed 6 years of her time and almost none of her truth. Nathan pressed 2 fingers against Grace's wrist. How long was she exposed to the cold? At least a day. Nathan looked at the marks around her wrists. Possibly longer. Roman stared at her injured hand. "Will she recover?" "I cannot answer that here. You have answered worse questions in moving vehicles." Nathan looked directly at him. "I can keep her alive. I cannot promise what she will wake up with." Roman turned toward the rain-covered window. Chicago passed in blurred streaks of white and red. He had spent his life believing every problem had a price. Money opened doors, fear closed mouths, influence shortened distance. But there was no payment for 21 lost hours. No threat could restore warmth to Grace's skin. No name could command damaged nerves to heal. At the hospital, the emergency team took her through a secured entrance. Roman followed until a nurse blocked the doors. "You cannot go farther." Roman looked through the glass as Grace disappeared beneath bright lights. Nathan removed his gloves. "She needs surgery. For her hand, for circulation damage. We also need to treat hypothermia and dehydration." Roman's voice lowered. "You said she was alive." "She is." Nathan paused. "But if you had found her yesterday, this conversation would be different." Roman did not move. Nathan continued carefully. "She may regain full use of her hand." "She may not. Her physical recovery could take months. Her emotional recovery may take longer." Roman looked through the glass. The corridor beyond was empty now. "You saved her life tonight," Nathan said. "That does not mean you arrived in time to save everything else." The words followed Roman into the waiting room. Hours passed, Marcus arrived near dawn with smoke on his coat and a cut above one eyebrow. Roman stood when he entered. Gavin abandoned the vehicle near Cicero. We found blood on the steering wheel. His, we do not know. Marcus placed a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was Grace's broken silver necklace. The memory card was missing. Roman looked at it. He took the drive. No, we searched the van. Gavin thought she had it, but he did not find it. Then where is it? Marcus sat across from him. Maybe Grace hid it. Roman looked toward the treatment room. She always prepared for the possibility everyone else ignored. At 6:14 in the morning, Nathan returned. Roman stood before he spoke. She is stable. The word should have brought relief. It did not. Nathan saw that. The surgery restored blood flow. We will not know the extent of the nerve damage until the swelling decreases. When will she wake? Her body has been through severe trauma. We are keeping her sedated for now. Roman looked through the window of the private intensive care room. Grace lay beneath warm blankets. A brace supported her right hand. Machines blinked around her with quiet precision. She looked smaller than she had in the basement, more distant. Roman entered the room and sat beside her bed. He did not touch her. For the first time since meeting Grace Whitmore, he understood that wanting to reach for someone did not give him the right. Morning turned into afternoon. Marcus returned with a cardboard archive box recovered from Grace's locked cabinet. Roman opened it beside the hospital window. The first folder carried his name. Inside were records of unusual payment requests from a shipping supplier. Grace had redirected them for review 6 months earlier. The investigation had prevented a loss of nearly $4 million. Roman remembered congratulating the finance department. Grace's name had never been mentioned. The second folder contained background reports on guests invited to a charity gala. One man had used a false identity to request a private meeting with Roman. Grace had changed Roman's arrival time and blamed traffic. Security arrested this man outside the venue with a weapon concealed beneath his coat. Roman remembered being angry that evening because she had altered his schedule without permission. The files continued. Anonymous letters, changed flight plans, suspicious drivers, compromised hotel reservations, threats against employees that Grace resolved quietly before they reached Roman's office. Every page showed another danger she had intercepted. Every page also showed how carefully she had protected Roman from knowing what she had done. Near the bottom of the box, he found a leather notebook. It was not a record of threats. It was a record of people. Send groceries to Mrs. Perez while her husband recovers. Move Jamal's shift so he can attend his daughter's graduation. Ask Naomi whether her mother needs another specialist. Do not schedule Rebecca in conference room B. Windowless rooms trigger panic attacks. Remind Roman that his sister's birthday is Thursday. Roman turned the pages slowly. Grace had known the medical concerns, family problems, food allergies, and private fears of people Roman passed every day without seeing. He had built a company. Grace had built a place where frightened people believed someone would notice. A photograph slipped from the final page. It had been taken at a company holiday dinner 3 years earlier. Roman stood near the center, surrounded by investors and senior executives. Grace was several feet behind him, helping an elderly janitor carry dessert plates. She was laughing. Roman had never noticed she was in the picture. He closed his eyes. A quiet sound came from the bed. Grace's fingers moved beneath the blanket. Roman stood immediately. Grace. Her eyelashes fluttered, then became still. Nathan entered moments later. It is a response, he said. Not consciousness yet. Roman remained beside the bed. It is enough. Nathan looked at the open archive box. No, it is not. Roman turned toward him. Nathan nodded at the files. You keep asking what she protected. Ask why she believed she had to do it alone. Roman looked back at Grace. The answer was already in every page, because Roman rewarded silence, because his organization treated vulnerability as weakness, because Grace had learned that protecting people meant carrying dangers no one else wanted to see. That evening, Roman returned to Cross Atlantic. The executive floor fell silent when he stepped from the elevator. He walked into the boardroom and placed Grace's employee badge in the center of the table. Every department head was present. Gavin's chair was empty. Roman remained standing. This belongs to the woman who protected this organization while the rest of us congratulated ourselves for being powerful. No one moved. Someone used our systems, our vendors, and our silence to place her in a basement. His gaze passed across the room. Effective immediately, every executive account security contract vendor, relationship access authorization, and private payment will be independently reviewed. One board member shifted in his chair. Roman freezing all operations could damage the company. Roman looked at him. A woman nearly died beneath one of our properties. It was not an official company property. That distinction exists only on paper. Silence returned. Roman placed Grace's files beside her badge. No one is exempt from the investigation. Not the board, not my family, not me. Several faces changed, some with surprise, some with fear. Roman noticed both. Naomi Price will control the legal review. Daniel Hart will oversee security. Any attempt to destroy records will be treated as proof of involvement. A senior executive cleared his throat. And the people responsible, Roman, thought of Gavin's voice. He thought of the moving vehicle and the choice placed before him. Find facts, he said. Not revenge. Marcus watched him from the far end of the table. Years earlier, Roman would have demanded blood before sunrise. Now he wanted the truth to survive longer than his anger. By midnight, 2 executives had resigned. A third tried to leave the city and was stopped at a private airfield with company records in his luggage. The betrayal had not begun with Grace's abduction. It had grown slowly through false invoices, private favors, altered security records, and men who believed no one would question them because Roman trusted power more than transparency. Grace had questioned them. That was why they feared her. Roman returned to the hospital before dawn. He brought the small plant from her desk, the photograph of her parents, and her blue coffee mug. He placed them beside the window. Grace looked less pale. Her breathing was steady. Roman sat in the chair and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, morning sunlight covered the floor. Grace was watching him. He stood too quickly. Her gaze moved around the room, confused and distant. Then it settled on his face. Roman. Her voice was barely audible. I am here. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, fear had entered them. Gavin. He escaped. Grace tried to move her right hand. Pain crossed her face. Roman stepped closer, then stopped himself. We will find him. She shook her head. You still do not understand. What her breathing became shallow. Roman waited. Grace looked toward the door as though she expected someone to enter. Then she looked back at him. Gavin did not decide to betray you. Roman felt the room grow cold. Grace swallowed. He was given permission. Roman remained beside the hospital bed, watching Grace as though the meaning might change if he waited long enough. It did not. The monitors continued their quiet rhythm. Morning light moved across the floor. Beyond the window, Chicago traffic crossed the bridge in slow lines, unaware that a single sentence had just divided Roman's life into everything he had believed and everything that was true. Permission from whom, he asked. Grace looked toward the door again. Roman followed her gaze. 2 of his men stood outside the room. Nathan was speaking with a nurse at the far end of the corridor. No one else was close enough to hear. Roman stepped to the door and closed it. When he returned, he did not stand over her. He pulled the chair closer and sat. Grace watched the movement with tired eyes. Arthur, she whispered. Roman did not react at first. Arthur Cross was his father's younger brother, chairman of Cross Atlantic Holdings. The man who had taught Roman how to read a contract, fire a weapon, and identify fear before it became betrayal. Arthur had carried Roman from the church on the day they buried his father. He had stood beside him when rival families tested the new leadership. He had placed the keys to the Cross estate in Roman's hand and sworn that blood would never turn against blood. Roman heard his own voice from a distance. My uncle gave Gavin permission to take you. Grace nodded once. Pain crossed her face as she tried to shift against the pillows. Roman reached toward her, then stopped before touching the blanket. What do you need, water? He poured it himself. Grace tried to raise the glass with her left hand, but her fingers shook. Roman held it near her lips without comment. She drank slowly. When she finished, he set it down. Tell me exactly what happened. Grace looked at her injured hand. The brace held her wrist steady. Swelling darkened the skin around her fingers. I found the lakefront transfers 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks I did not know what they meant then. You should have told me. I tried. Roman lowered his eyes. Grace continued. At first I thought someone was stealing from the company. The payments were too small to trigger the normal reviews, but they followed a pattern. Every transfer cleared shortly before one of our routes was changed. Gavin controlled the routes, yes. And Arthur, he controlled the board authorizations that protected the payments. Roman leaned back slightly. No payment of that size requires the chairman, not individually. Together they did. She looked at him. Arthur divided them across departments. Maintenance, insurance, emergency storage, consulting fees. Every office approved one harmless piece. No one saw the whole structure. You did. I saw the same account number appear twice. A faint bitterness touched her voice. Someone copied it incorrectly on an invoice. One number became another. It was a small mistake. Roman thought of the files in her cabinet. Millions of dollars discovered because Grace noticed one number. What were they buying? He asked. Information. Routes, inspection schedules, driver names, storage locations. Roman's jaw tightened. The Cross organization had lost men during those attacks. Drivers had been dragged from trucks. Guards had been shot. One warehouse manager in Gary had been left alive only long enough to deliver a warning. Roman had blamed the Halsteads. He had retaliated. Men had died because Arthur had placed a weapon in his hand and pointed him toward the wrong enemy. Grace watched the realization move across his face. The Halsteads paid Gavin for access, she said. Arthur made certain the attacks were serious enough to create fear, but controlled enough to avoid destroying the company. Why, he thought you were making the family weak. Roman's expression became still. Grace continued carefully. You moved too much business into legal shipping. You closed the private rooms at the docks. You stopped allowing narcotics through cross routes. You began replacing Arthur's men with professional managers. He agreed to every change. He signed the documents. That is agreement. No, that is patience. The truth entered the room one piece at a time. Arthur had never accepted Roman's direction. He had waited. He had allowed losses to spread through the company. He had used the Halsteads to make Roman look vulnerable. He had created the conditions for a war knowing that frightened men would ask for the old methods to return. Roman would be forced to become his father. Arthur would remain beside him, guiding every violent decision. What proof did you find? Roman asked. Transfers from the Halstead accounts to companies controlled by Gavin. Those companies paid Lakefront. Lakefront paid consultants connected to Arthur. Connected how one consultant bought a house for Arthur's son. Another paid his gambling debt in Las Vegas. A third transferred money to a trust created in Arthur's wife's name. Roman stood and walked toward the window. His reflection appeared faintly in the glass. For years he had searched for enemies beyond the river, beyond the city, beyond his own walls. The enemy had attended family dinners. The enemy had poured drinks in his father's study. The enemy had placed one hand on Roman's shoulder and called him son. Behind him, Grace spoke quietly. I copied everything onto the memory card. Gavin took your necklace. The card was not in the necklace. Roman turned. Grace's eyes held a tired trace of satisfaction. He had been watching me for days. I knew he would search it. Where did you put the card? In the cap of my fountain pen. Roman remembered the garage footage. He remembered the evidence photographs, the scattered pages, the blue pen cap beneath the white van. Daniel's team had collected it. Roman reached for his phone. Grace's voice stopped him. Arthur does not know where it is. Then he does not know whether the evidence survived. No, Roman called Daniel. The former detective answered immediately. The blue cap from the garage, Roman said. Open it. There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke. I will call you back. Roman ended the call. Grace closed her eyes. Exhaustion had drawn shadows beneath them. You need to rest. I have been resting for 8 days. You were unconscious. That is not the same thing. Despite everything, the answer sounded like Grace. Roman almost smiled. Then she opened her eyes again. There is something else. He waited. Arthur knew I would come if Gavin said you were hurt. Roman felt the words before he understood them. Grace looked away. That is why they used your name. Silence spread between them. Roman sat again. You believed him. I believed you might be in danger. You walked toward a van because someone said I needed you. Yes. Even after I ignored you? Grace's eyes moved back to his. You ignoring me did not make me stop caring whether you lived. The monitors seemed louder. Roman looked at her injured hand, then at the pale line where her necklace had been torn away. He had faced armed men without hesitation. He had ordered decisions that changed the balance of power across cities. But there were no defenses against the calm honesty of the woman in front of him. Why did you not put the evidence in my hands, he asked. Grace's expression changed. Not anger, something older, something more tired. Because you would not have believed me. I believed there was a problem. You believed the problem could wait. That is not the same thing. It was to the people in that basement. Roman stared at her. Grace's voice remained soft. She did not need volume to wound him. You trusted Arthur before you trusted the documents. You trusted Gavin before you trusted my fear. Every time I tried to tell you something that did not fit into your schedule, you made me feel as though I was interrupting your real life. Roman's throat tightened. You were my real life. The words escaped before he could control them. Grace looked at him. For a moment, even the machines seemed to fall silent. Roman did not take the words back. He had spent years thinking of Grace as part of the structure around him. The office, the calendar, the voice that reminded him where to stand and when to leave. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. She was the person he looked for when entering a room, the person whose absence altered the air, the person who knew when his anger was pain and when his silence meant exhaustion. She had become the center of his life so quietly that he had mistaken her permanence for proof she could never be lost. Grace turned her face toward the window. You only learned that when I disappeared. Roman lowered his eyes. Yes. The answer seemed to surprise her. He continued. I could tell you that I was distracted. I could tell you the company was under pressure. I could tell you I trusted the wrong men because they had been beside me longer. Grace said nothing. None of it changes the fact that you stood in front of me and asked me to listen. His voice roughened, and I answered the phone. Grace's eyes closed. Roman watched a tear move slowly across her temple. He did not reach for it. I kept thinking you would notice, she whispered. I should have noticed before you were gone. Grace breathed in carefully. The office will need someone else. No. Her eyes opened. Roman removed her employee badge from the inside pocket of his coat. He had carried it since the boardroom meeting. He placed it on the table beside the bed. Grace looked at it. You are not returning to the desk outside my office, he said. Her expression became guarded. I did not say I wanted to. I know. Roman folded his hands. You do not owe me another schedule. You do not owe me another warning. You do not owe this company one more day. Grace stared at the badge. I gave 6 years to that company. You gave 6 years to me, and you did not see it. I see it now. That does not repair it. No. Roman accepted the word. Grace looked at him again. He had never appeared uncertain in front of her. Even on the worst days, he had possessed answers. If he did not know the truth, he created a decision strong enough to replace it. Now he sat beside her with nothing but responsibility. I thought protecting people meant destroying anyone who threatened them, he said. You protected people before danger reached them. I did not understand the difference. Grace's left hand tightened around the blanket. Roman continued. I cannot undo what happened. I cannot give you back the hours you spent in that room. I cannot promise your hand will heal. I cannot ask you to trust the man who taught you that your fear could wait. His eyes held hers. But I will not use what I feel for you as another reason you have to stay. Grace's breath caught. Roman had never spoken about feeling, not to her, perhaps not to anyone. What do you feel, she asked. The question was quiet enough that he could have pretended not to hear. Roman looked toward the glass door, then back at her. Something I should have named before it became regret. Grace's eyes shone. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have today. She studied him for a long moment. Then she looked away. Roman stood. I need to end what Arthur started. Fear returned to her face. You cannot go to him alone. I will not. You cannot let him know I am awake. I won't. Roman. He stopped at the door. Grace looked at him with the same expression she had worn when asking him to read the file. This time, he waited. Do not become your father. Roman held her gaze. Then he nodded once. Daniel called as Roman entered the hallway. There was a memory card inside the pen cap, he said. Naomi is opening the files now. Make copies, already happening. Bring one to Cross Atlantic. Roman looked through the glass at Grace. And tell Marcus to call the board. At 4 that afternoon, the directors of Cross Atlantic Holdings gathered in the main conference room. The Chicago skyline stretched behind them beneath a pale winter sun. News of Grace's rescue had begun moving through the company, but no official statement had been released. Arthur Cross arrived last. He wore a dark gray suit and carried a silver-handled cane he did not need but enjoyed using. At 67, he still possessed the heavy presence of a man accustomed to watching younger men stand when he entered. Several board members did. Roman did not. Arthur looked toward Gavin's empty chair. Where is Shaw missing? Roman said. Arthur took his place near the head of the table. I heard Grace woke this morning. Roman's face revealed nothing. She remains unconscious. Arthur nodded slowly. A terrible thing. Yes, we should discuss security failures before the press learns that an employee was found inside a property linked to the company. Roman watched him. Not a question about Grace's condition. Not a question about her injuries. Only the company. Arthur opened a leather folder. I prepared a statement. It describes the building as an unauthorized vendor site and Gavin as a rogue executive who acted independently. Naomi sat across from him. That statement is false. Arthur glanced at her. It is controlled. It is false, she repeated. Arthur turned back to Roman. Your attorney is forgetting who employs her. Roman answered. She remembers exactly. Daniel closed the conference room doors. Marcus remained beside them. Arthur noticed the movement. His expression did not change, but his hand tightened slightly around the cane. Roman placed the lakefront records on the table. We found the payments. Arthur glanced down. Gavin's payments? The board authorizations carry your code. My office approves hundreds of transactions. Your office also protected the shell companies. Arthur leaned back. You are emotional. That is understandable. Grace has been useful to you. Roman's gaze hardened. Useful. Arthur sighed. Do not turn a secretary's mistakes into a family crisis. Roman felt the old anger rise. It was familiar. Simple. It wanted Arthur's blood on the polished table. Grace's voice returned to him. Do not become your father. Roman opened another file. The Halstead payments reached Gavin through 3 companies. Those companies purchased a house for your son, cleared his casino debt, and funded a trust for Eleanor. Arthur looked at the documents but did not touch them. Records can be manipulated, so can access logs. Roman pressed a button on the table. A recording began playing through the conference room speakers. At first, there was only the sound of papers moving. Then Gavin's voice. Arthur said, Cross needs a war. Your little audit is standing in the way. Grace answered, Roman will see what you have done. Gavin laughed. Roman sees what Arthur allows him to see. The recording ended. No one moved. Arthur's face had lost color. Roman looked at every person around the table. This company lost cargo contracts and men because Arthur Cross sold our routes to an enemy. Arthur struck the cane against the floor. I saved this family before you learned how to tie your shoes. You created attacks against your own people. I created pressure. You created funerals. Arthur stood. The years seemed to fall away from him. You were weakening us. Closing routes, refusing profitable cargo, replacing loyal men with accountants and attorneys. I was building something that did not require children to inherit wars. You were ashamed of what made you powerful. Roman rose slowly. No, I was tired of men like you confusing violence with strength. Arthur stared at him. Your father understood. My father is dead. Because he trusted the wrong people. Roman looked around the table. So did I. Arthur stepped closer. You think handing files to attorneys makes you honorable? You think that woman in the hospital changes what you are? Roman did not answer. Arthur's mouth curved. She loved you. That was obvious to every man in the building except you. The words entered the room like smoke. Arthur continued. It made her useful. Tell her you were hurt and she walked willingly into the van. Roman's hand closed into a fist. Marcus shifted near the door. Arthur smiled. There he is, your father's son. Roman took one step forward. Arthur did not retreat. Do it, he whispered. End the conversation the way a cross man should. Roman looked into the face of the man who had helped raise him. He saw his father's rules, his father's grief, his father's empire built on the certainty that fear lasted longer than love. Then Roman looked through the glass walls. Employees had gathered outside the conference room. They could not hear everything, but they could see him. For years, they had learned leadership by watching what Roman did when challenged. Roman opened his hand. My father built a family that survived through fear. Arthur's smile faded. I intend to build one that survives the truth. Roman turned toward Naomi. Give the evidence to federal investigators. Several board members reacted at once. Arthur stared at him. You would hand your own blood to the government. I am handing them a man who ordered attacks on Cross employees and arranged the abduction of a woman who discovered it. Arthur looked toward Marcus. You support this? Marcus opened the conference room door. 2 federal agents waited outside with Daniel. Marcus answered, I support the facts. Arthur's face twisted. You ungrateful bastard. Roman remained still as the agents approached. Arthur pointed the silver handle of his cane toward him. When this company falls, remember that she did this to you. Roman looked at the files Grace had risked her life to preserve. He said, She gave me the chance to see what was already rotten. The agents escorted Arthur from the room. Employees moved aside as he passed. No one lowered their eyes. That evening, Gavin Shaw was arrested near the Canadian border. He carried a forged passport, $40,000 in cash, and a list of Cross employees he had intended to sell to the Halsteads. The news reached Roman while he stood before hundreds of employees in the Cross Atlantic lobby. There was no stage, no prepared lighting, no controlled corporate statement. Roman stood at the foot of the main staircase with Grace's empty desk visible on the floor above. A member of my family and several executives used this company to betray the people working inside it, he said. The lobby remained silent. They succeeded because our systems rewarded loyalty to powerful men instead of loyalty to the truth. He looked at the faces around him. Assistants, drivers, accountants, security guards, managers, cleaning crews, people Grace had known by name. I ignored a warning because I trusted history more than evidence. Grace Whitmore paid the price for that decision. His voice remained steady. This company failed her. I failed her. A few employees looked at one another. Roman Cross did not admit failure, not publicly, not privately. He continued, An independent office will review every vendor security contract executive account and internal complaint. Employees will be able to report misconduct without approval from management. Counseling and emergency assistance will be available to every person in this building. He paused. No employee will be punished for telling the truth even when the truth concerns me. The company did not become safer because Roman announced it. The changes cost money. Contracts were suspended. Investors withdrew. Board members resigned. Newspapers printed photographs of Roman beside headlines about corruption and organized crime. Roman signed every release. He opened every account. He allowed investigators into offices no outsider had entered before. For the first time in his life, he accepted damage he could not control because concealing it would require another person to carry the cost. Grace was released from the hospital 12 days later. Her right hand remained in a brace. Nathan had warned that therapy could take months, and full movement might never return. Roman waited near their private entrance. He wore no overcoat despite the cold. A black car stood behind him. Grace emerged in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. Her sister Claire Whitmore walked beside her carrying a small overnight bag. Roman stepped forward. Grace's eyes met his. For a moment, neither spoke. Roman looked toward the car. I can take you home. My sister is taking me. He nodded. Of course. Grace's sister helped her stand. Roman moved instinctively, then stopped when Grace lifted her left hand. She steadied herself against the chair. I can do it. Roman lowered his hands. I know. Grace looked toward the street. Snow had begun falling in small, silent pieces. Arthur in federal custody, Gavin arrested, and the company still standing. That was not what I asked. Roman understood. It is changing. Grace studied him. Because you wanted to. Because it has to. She adjusted the strap of her bag with her left hand. The movement was awkward. Roman watched her struggle without taking over. I do not know if I can forgive you, she said. You do not have to. I do not know if I can ever enter that building again. Then do not come back for me. Grace looked at him. Roman continued. Come back only if there is something inside it that belongs to you. The snow gathered in her dark hair. For a second, she looked like the woman who had once stood outside his office with coffee and a warning. Then she turned toward her sister's car. Roman opened the rear door but did not offer his hand. Grace lowered herself into the seat. Before the door closed, she looked back at him. You should wear a coat. Roman almost smiled. You are not my secretary anymore. No. Grace rested her injured hand carefully in her lap. But apparently you still need someone to remind you when you are freezing. Her sister closed the door. The car moved away from the hospital. Roman stood in the falling snow until the taillights disappeared into Chicago traffic. For the first few weeks after Grace left the hospital, he did not call her. Every morning he opened his phone and looked at her number. Every morning he closed it again. He sent no flowers, no gifts, no handwritten apology waiting outside her door. For most of his life, Roman had used money and access to shorten every distance. He could place a car outside any building clear, a restaurant arrange a private flight, or make a problem vanish before sunrise. Grace had asked for none of those things. She had asked him to listen, so Roman did the one thing that felt more difficult than forcing his way through a locked door. He waited without demanding to be rewarded for it. The reports from her doctors came only when Grace authorized them. Roman learned that she had begun physical therapy 3 times a week. The nerves in her right hand were healing slowly. Some mornings she could close her fingers around a soft ball. Other mornings pain traveled from her wrist to her shoulder before she even got out of bed. Cold weather made the stiffness worse. Windowless rooms made her breathing change. Underground parking garages remained impossible. The first time her sister drove into one, Grace opened the car door before it stopped moving and nearly fell onto the concrete. After that, Claire parked on the street even when rain covered the sidewalks and the nearest space was 2 blocks away. Grace also began seeing a trauma counselor. At first, she spoke only about practical things. Sleep, pain, work. She did not speak about the basement. She did not speak about the moment the van door closed or the sound of Gavin telling her that Roman would not notice. Then, one afternoon, while attempting to write her name during therapy, the pen slipped from her fingers and struck the floor. Grace stared at it. Her therapist waited. Grace whispered, "That was the one thing no one could take from me. What was my handwriting?" The answer broke something open. She cried until her injured hand shook against her chest. For 6 years, Grace had written Roman's world into order. Appointments, warnings, names, birthdays, small reminders in blue ink that prevented important things from disappearing beneath urgent ones. Now she struggled to form a straight line. Recovery did not arrive like morning light in a hospital room. It came unevenly with progress that vanished and courage that had to be found again before breakfast. Roman never saw those sessions. He learned not to ask for details that did not belong to him. Instead, he changed the building she had left behind. Cross Atlantic lost 3 major contracts during the federal investigation. 2 banks suspended credit agreements. The company's stock fell sharply after Arthur's arrest became public. Several board members urged Roman to issue a statement blaming Gavin and Arthur alone. Roman refused. When a reporter asked whether he had known about the shell companies, Roman answered no. I should have. The sentence appeared across every news channel in Chicago. Investors called it reckless. Employees called it the first honest thing they had ever heard from the executive floor. Roman removed the private security department from Gavin's former chain of command. He hired an outside firm to review every complaint filed during the previous 5 years. He established an independent ethics committee with the authority to investigate any executive, including him. The first complaint submitted through the new anonymous system concerned a senior manager who had threatened to cut hours from employees who refused unpaid weekend work. Under the old structure, the complaint would have passed through 3 supervisors and disappeared. Under the new one, the manager was suspended before the end of the week. Roman read the report twice. At the bottom, an investigator had written a sentence that stayed with him. The employee stated that she reported the conduct because she believed Grace Whitmore would have wanted someone to notice. Roman closed the file and sat alone in his office. Grace's desk had been removed from the space outside. He had not ordered another secretary to sit there. His new executive assistant worked with a team on another floor and left at a reasonable hour. Roman managed his own coffee. He missed meetings. He forgot lunch. He called his sister 2 days after her anniversary instead of 1 day before it. The company continued functioning. The discovery should have embarrassed him. Instead, it freed something. Grace had never been necessary because Roman was incapable of surviving without her. She had been necessary because she saw the parts of the world he had trained himself to ignore. That truth made what happened to her worse. It also showed him what had to change. 3 months after her release, Grace received a plain envelope from Cross Atlantic. There was no personal note from Roman. Inside was a complete report detailing the company's reforms, the status of the investigation, the money recovered from the shell accounts, and the assistance offered to employees harmed by Arthur's decisions. A final page contained a statement signed by the board. The company formally acknowledged that Grace's evidence had exposed the conspiracy and that its failure to protect her had resulted from structural negligence at the highest levels. Beneath the board signatures was Roman's. Grace read the statement in her sister's kitchen. Claire stood beside the stove, pretending not to watch. "He did not ask you to come back," Claire said. "No." "He did not ask you to forgive him." "No." Claire turned off the burner. "Does that disappoint you?" Grace looked down at Roman's signature. His handwriting was severe and controlled, nothing like the quick blue notes she had once left across his desk. "It makes me believe he heard me." That night, Grace placed the report inside a drawer. She did not call him. 2 weeks later, she opened the drawer again. By spring, Chicago had begun to soften. Ice disappeared from the river. Restaurant tables returned to sidewalks. Trees along the lake produced the first thin leaves of the season. Grace could now hold a pen for nearly 10 minutes before pain forced her to stop. Her handwriting had changed. The letters were slower, less precise, and slightly uneven. She hated them at first. Then her therapist asked why new handwriting had to resemble the old version to count as hers. Grace went home and filled 3 pages. Not schedules, not reminders for anyone else. Questions. What would safety look like if it did not depend on one person noticing everything? What happens when employees are afraid of the people assigned to protect them? Who listens when the powerful control the complaint? At the bottom of the 3rd page, she wrote one final question. What would I build if I stopped standing outside someone else's office? The answer took another month. 6 months after the basement, Roman left a meeting on the 39th floor and entered the main lobby. He had spent the morning negotiating a labor agreement that required him to listen more than he spoke. It had taken 4 hours. No one had been threatened. No one had left in fear. Marcus considered it a miracle. Roman considered it exhausting. He was reviewing a document as he crossed the marble floor when the lobby became strangely quiet. He looked up. Grace stood near the windows overlooking the river. She wore a navy coat and held a thick folder against her chest. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders. There was no employee badge around her neck. She looked healthier, not untouched. Her right hand rested carefully beneath the folder. When someone passed too close behind her, her shoulders tightened before she forced them to relax. Roman saw all of it. He stopped several feet away. For one suspended moment, neither spoke. Then Grace said, "Hello, Roman." It was the first time she had used his name without fear, urgency, or the distance required by her position. "Hello, Grace." His voice was softer than anyone in the lobby had heard before. He looked at the folder. "Are you here for the board meeting?" "Yes. Should I be concerned?" "That depends on whether you read the material I sent last week." Roman glanced toward Marcus, who stood near the elevator. Marcus suddenly found the ceiling interesting. Roman looked back at Grace. "I read it, all of it twice. Then you should be very concerned." A quiet laugh escaped her. The sound was not the same as the laughter in the holiday photograph. It was smaller and more careful. But it was real. Roman felt something inside his chest loosen. Grace handed him the folder. He did not take it immediately. "Is your hand all right?" The question came before he could stop it. Grace looked down. "It hurts when the weather changes. I am sorry, I know." Roman accepted the folder with both hands, careful not to brush her fingers unless she chose the contact. Across the cover were the words, "Whitmore Center for Employee Safety and Advocacy." Inside was a complete proposal for an independent office providing workplace safety reviews, trauma counseling, emergency assistance, legal support, and confidential investigations. The center would report directly to a committee outside Roman's authority. It would have access to every department, including his. Roman reached the page describing executive oversight. Grace watched him. "That section is not negotiable. It should not be. You would not control the investigations." "I understand. You would not select the director." Roman looked at her. "I assume the board already has someone in mind." Grace lifted her chin slightly. "They asked me." Roman closed the folder. For years he had imagined Grace returning to the place outside his office. The thought had been selfish, even when he dressed it as hope. Now she stood before him with a plan that did not place her behind him, beneath him, or at his service. She had returned with authority of her own. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "I told them I would accept under 3 conditions. Roman waited. "The office remains independent. Every employee can use it regardless of position, and no one is ever told to carry evidence alone?" Roman nodded. "Anything else?" "Yes." Her eyes held his. "I am not your secretary, I know. I will not manage your schedule." "I have already suffered the consequences. You missed a meeting with the governor. He eventually found another day. You sent your sister flowers on the wrong anniversary." She appreciated the confusion. Grace tried not to smile. Roman continued. "And I have consumed coffee that should be illegal in 3 states. That sounds like a personal failure. It has been a difficult 6 months." The smile appeared. This time it reached her eyes. The board approved the Whitmore Center that afternoon. Grace signed the final documents with her right hand. The letters were slow and uneven. No one rushed her. Roman stood at the other end of the table and watched without pity. When she finished, the room applauded. Grace looked startled. Then she placed the pen down and allowed herself to hear it. Later they stood alone on the terrace above the Chicago River. The evening air was cool, but not cold enough to hurt her hand. Boats moved beneath the bridge. The city glowed around them, loud and alive. Roman kept a respectful distance. "Would you have dinner with me?" Grace turned toward him. "We had dinner dozens of times. You arranged dinner. You reminded me to arrive. You watched me answer calls while the food became cold. That is accurate. I am asking for one evening in which you are not my employee, not my protector, and not responsible for saving me from myself." Grace studied him. Roman did not fill the silence. He had finally learned that silence could belong to someone else. "One dinner," she said. His expression softened. "One dinner. And if your phone rings, I turn it off. You own 6 phones. I will turn off all 6. That sounds medically dangerous. I have a doctor. You rarely listen to him. I am developing new habits." Grace looked toward the river. "I cannot promise this becomes anything. I am not asking for a promise. I may never trust you the way I did before." Roman's answer came quietly. "You should not." She looked at him. "I want the trust you choose after seeing me clearly. Not the trust you gave because you believed it was your job." Grace's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Roman continued. "I was too late to prevent what happened to you. I was too late to protect the part of you that believed I would always notice." His voice tightened. "I will not pretend love repairs that." The word remained between them. Love, not dependence, not loyalty, not regret. Grace breathed in slowly. "No," she said. "It does not." Roman nodded. Then Grace stepped closer. Not into his arms. Not far enough to erase the distance. Only close enough that their shoulders almost touched as they looked over the city. Below them, an employee crossed the terrace entrance, hesitated, and approached Grace with a concern about a supervisor. Grace listened. Roman waited. She asked questions, explained the new process, and assured the employee that reporting the problem would not cost her job. When the woman left, Roman opened the terrace door for Grace. She paused beside him. Dinner is at 7. I will be there. You forget everything. Roman reached into his coat and removed the blue fountain pen recovered from the garage. The cap had been repaired. The ink cartridge had been replaced. He held it out. Grace stared at it for a long moment. Then she took it with her right hand. Her fingers trembled, but they closed around it. Not everything Roman said. Grace looked at the pen, then at him. They entered the building together, not with Grace walking behind him, not with Roman expecting her to carry the weight. Side by side, they crossed the lobby while the city moved beyond the glass. Roman Cross had been too late to save the life they once understood. But Grace had never asked him to rebuild the past. She had asked him to see her. This time when she walked beside him, he did.